whatever happened in the world, it was all about Charles and Diana.
She would have been horrified to know what was really going on behind the scenes.
Her casting a doubt over Charles's suitability as king.
How could she criticise the monarchy?
Diana was a lamb to the slaughter when it comes to the royal family.
1992 was absolutely devastating for the royal family.
Anything that could go wrong did go wrong, and right from the word go.
We had a disintegration of royal marriages everywhere you looked.
This book was a bombshell in its truest form.
There is no way that she would have wanted the marriage to break up.
I think the Queen was very threatened by Diana's huge popularity because Diana only had to step out of her palace for people wanting to know what she was doing and taking photographs.
There was a sense of shock, tragedy, and people had never seen anything like this. The world had never experienced anything like this.
It was the first time that I ever recall the public being almost outraged about their monarch. It was almost like a tornado. You know, everything was coming at once at her, and there was no time to slow down.
Diana came from an extremely aristocratic family, the Spencers, and her father, Johnny Spencer, had been an equerry to King George VI, the Queen's father, and then he'd also been an equerry to Princess Elizabeth. And the family were very strongly tied to the royal family.
It was 1977 that Charles came to stay as a friend of my sister Sarah's for a shoot. We sort of met in a ploughed field.
The Queen was absolutely delighted by the prospect of Charles and Diana getting married. And she wrote a letter to a friend and she said, I really like those Spencer girls. And then she said, and of course Diana is one of us. I think the tension between Diana and the Queen first emerged when Diana went to live at Buckingham Palace, and the Queen thought, I must get to know her. And she would invite her to have lunch with her, and Diana always found an excuse not to go because she was frightened of the Queen. But they had nothing in common. Diana wasn't particularly a country girl, although she was born in the country. They didn't have the kind of country interests that the Queen could relate to. When Diana married Prince Charles, she didn't really receive any instruction as to what to do. So she didn't feel she was disrupting anything, but because she did things her way, she did disrupt things.
Duty always came first with that generation, his generation of royal family, and certainly the Queen's generation of the royal family. He wasn't around when Diana needed a husband around to care for her.
I think things started to go wrong in the marriage very quickly because Diana discovered that Charles was still seeing Camilla, although he did give up seeing Camilla, but she knew that Camilla was somewhere in the background and she became obsessed with it, and it made her cling on to Charles in a very difficult way.
Charles and Diana's relationship was falling apart, but no one really knew. There were rumours, there were whispers, no one could quite work out what was going on. No one ever had it confirmed, but the marriage was clearly falling apart.
I suppose one of the worst years for the late Queen was 1992, what she labelled at the end of that year as her Annus Horribilis, and it really was a horrible year.
1992 was absolutely devastating for the royal family and for the monarch in particular.
Anything that could go wrong did go wrong, and right from the word go.
Well, I was a fairly young reporter at the time, in my 20s, at the Sun newspaper. This was, manna from heaven. It was like, there were constant stories, constant splashes. This was a huge year in terms of the personal lives of her children. We had a disintegration of royal marriages everywhere you looked. Princess Anne and Mark Phillips, there was the breakup of that marriage. We had the breakup of the Andrew and Sarah's marriage. But more significantly, we had the clear breakup of the heir to the throne, Prince Charles, and Princess Diana's marriage, which would have had constitutional implications.
It was very clear in the 90s that the marriage was breaking down, and it was breaking down pretty rapidly.
If you're going through a separation, it's bad enough that happening in private, but these separations were played out on the global stage. And almost every day there was another tabloid scandal involving the Prince and Princess of Wales.
I was their press secretary, and the media at the time, particularly photographers, were more focused on the two of them as photographic objects in their reaction to each other.
I remember being on a tour to India where so much was going on in the relationship. You could see it unfolding. Diana said she was going to go to the Taj Mahal, the greatest monument to love in the world, alone.
We had that very famous picture of Diana in front of the Taj Mahal, a photograph that I set up. But unfortunately, it'd been preceded in 1980 when Charles went to the Taj Mahal, saying, one day I would like to bring my wife here. Well, there they were in India, and he was about 1,500 miles away in Bangalore.
You know, there was a saying then that if you go to the Taj Mahal as a bachelor, you only ever return with a woman that you truly love.
Meanwhile, Diana, very good at manipulating the cameras, posed in a certain way that left the journos open to interpretation. Pensive, lonely, thinking.
And I remember Simon McCoy of then Sky News asked the princess, how do you feel? And she said it was a very healing experience. Make of it what you will. So she left an open-ended moment for the media to basically show that the marriage was over.
We didn't know how serious this was until Andrew Morton's book, Diana, Her True Story, arrived.
Because we've had Spare and we've had big royal books, you kind of forget the impact that Andrew Morton's Diana, Her True Story had. This book was a bombshell in its truest form. There were allegations of extramarital affairs on both sides. There were stories about her eating disorder, about her bulimia, about her mental health, which had clearly declined in the years that she'd married into the royal family, stories about how she'd thrown herself down the stairs after an argument with Charles when she was pregnant. And, you know, it really did show her life in a completely different way to how it had been publicly presented. You know, the Queen's philosophy had always been, throughout her reign, never complain, never explain. And so this book, the sort of public wrangling between Charles and Diana, went against everything that the Queen knew to be in the best interests of the monarchy, and was a very sharp, unwelcome wake-up call, really, for her as to the true state of her son's marriage.
This marriage and this whole situation, it was a powder keg. It was obviously never going to end well, and the Queen would have been fully aware of everything that was going on. And so that was the moment, I think, that she realised, in her view, that Diana was probably damaged goods.
At the time, the author Andrew Morton quite rightly didn't want to reveal his source, but he did say that he'd spoken to some of her friends. It wasn't until after she died in 1997 that I think Andrew did say, well, actually, okay, I confess, it was Diana. But at the time, despite everything coming out, despite this book travelling around the world and everyone reading all these revelations, they may have been living separate lives, but they were still married, they were still seen as a couple.
Then they went to Korea just weeks before the announcement of the separation.
Watching them alighting from the aircraft, I looked at my protection officer and I said, we've lost this one, and we had lost it. The first picture that emerged, not just of them coming off the plane, but at a war memorial, and both of them looked pretty hostile with each other, that they didn't want to be in each other's company.
It was quite obvious to everybody on that visit that this marriage was over.
And it was soon after that return from South Korea that John Major announced in Parliament that they would be separating. Divorce wasn't on the cards, but when you got separation, divorce happens in the fullness of time.
The Queen was absolutely horrified by this headline, The War of the Waleses. And there really was a War of the Waleses. There were two camps. There was the Diana camp and there was the more traditional Charles camp. The war with the Waleses worried her because it was actually affecting the government. I think there was a general election looming, and still all the papers were talking about was Charles and Diana. Whatever happened in the world, it was all about Charles and Diana. And the Queen knew that this was not what the monarchy was supposed to be doing. They were not meant to be the story.
The Queen was in a very difficult situation here because this was her son who was going to take the crown after she departs. It was so important that Charles has a steady family life, that he has a wife, that he has 2 children, and that everybody assumed that Diana would become Queen. She would have been devastated to know everything that happened. She would have been horrified to know what was really going on behind the scenes, but also a little bit upset, a little bit concerned about Charles and Diana, because she adored both of them.
And of course also the Queen was very worried about how this is going to play out with her grandchildren, with William and Harry, who were both at Eton at the time, and they were reading about their parents' divorce and separation while trying to carry on and go to school.
There is no way that she would have wanted the marriage to break up. She was a very religious woman. I don't think she actually wanted that to happen, but over the years, over the time, I think she ended up being resigned to the fact that, yes, they ultimately would have to divorce and go their separate ways.
Charles and Diana were already separated, but the Queen wrote to them because things were spiralling completely out of control.
There was Charles's interview with Dimbleby in which he admitted to his affair with Camilla.
The Queen had no idea that Charles was going to reveal that he had committed adultery with Camilla when he spoke to Jonathan Dimbleby.
Then there was the Martin Bashir interview. So you've got the Queen trying to keep the royal family together in this public perception of unity, and yet it seems to be falling apart at the seams.
Nobody knew about Diana's interview with Martin Bashir. The Queen certainly didn't know, and when she was told about it, she was absolutely horrified because Diana had washed her dirty linen in public. How could she? And how could she criticise the monarchy and criticise her husband, who's the monarchy of the future?
Diana, particularly in those last months of her life, she was dating Dodi Fayed, she was holidaying in Saint-Tropez. You know, in many ways she was sort of living her best life as a single woman.
Diana still held centre stage. Whatever she did was really the most interesting news. But Diana was clever because she realised that she had this power and thought she would put it to good use. That's how she got involved with the landmine campaign. She had a lot of ideas for her future and what she was able to do.
And then tragically, the year after they were divorced, of course, Diana was killed in a car crash in Paris.
You think it'd be one of those moments where you'd wake up the next morning and actually it was a dream, it was a nightmare, and you'd waken up and it wasn't true.
I had a call from one of my colleagues at around about 3:10 in the morning to say she'd gone. 35 minutes later, I was at my desk. The private secretary was trying to get hold of Earl Spencer, who was in South Africa, to give him details about what had happened, and asking him what type of funeral he thought appropriate. And Charlie Spencer decided that given Diana's role within the monarchy, he felt it should be a royal funeral. I was informed half an hour later that Charles was going to fly to Paris to pick up Diana and bring her back. And on the way he would fetch her sisters and they would go to Paris and bring Diana's body back. He always loved Diana, and I suppose deep down inside he will always love Diana. But he was doing it not just for himself, but for Diana's sisters, Diana's family, and Diana's sons and his sons. And it was important that he went, and went he did.
So I was working for the Ministry of Defence press office in 1997, and I got a call saying, we're putting on a media facility at Northolt Air Base, and can you drive up there and help? And it was subdued, the media was subdued. And then I remember driving from the airport back to the office, and we were almost following the hearse, and people were sort of silent at the side of the road. It was eerie. London was eerie as this hearse sort of drove through to go to the mortuary.
The public sentiment, that sort of nationwide, indeed global mourning when Diana died was absolutely unprecedented. And people had never seen anything like this. The world had never experienced anything like this. There was a sense of shock, tragedy, confusion, disbelief, heartache, mourning for this woman whom most people had never met. That was when the Queen made a really controversial decision, ultimately to stay up at Balmoral with William and Harry so she could look after them. But of course that meant she wasn't in England, she wasn't there sort of supporting the nation, which is very much her role at a time of need. And it became quickly apparent that there was a big Queen-shaped hole in Britain at this point.
I think that the main difference between Diana and the Queen, and everything else stemmed from that, was that the Queen didn't believe in shows of affection in public. And Diana believed that you showed affection wherever you wanted to, and she didn't mind who was looking. In fact, she thought it was a good thing. And the Queen obviously was born in 1926, and things were not like that.
The people wanted to see the monarch. They wanted to see the monarch come down and display her grief with them, because they were feeling grief and they wanted to see the monarch's grief.
Very, very, very disgraceful, I find their behaviour. Very disgraceful.
What do you think, madam?
I think it's disgusting that they have not appeared or said a word relating to all this.
The fact that they hadn't flown the Union flag at half-mast was seen as a big error, and it was an error because people couldn't understand.
I think it must be very, very cold-hearted not to have a flag up. I think it's a disgrace on the whole royal family.
In 1997, the policy was that if the monarch was not in residence, there would be no flag, there would be no royal standard.
People just thought this was all baloney, this was all protocol from another century, and that they had to wake up. And it took them an awful long time to wake up and really smell the roses. It was probably, I think, a briefing from Alistair Campbell to Tony Blair about how volatile it was out on the streets, that Blair basically instructed the Queen to come down to London, for her own good.
The Queen never did things to order. She did things according to her timing. Her timing was that something should be said on the eve of the funeral. When she came back to London, she went to St James's Palace first, and when she appeared, she was greeted by polite applause. She then jumped in the car and went down to Buckingham Palace. Again, when she arrived there, she was greeted by polite applause. She stopped to talk to an 11-year-old who had a bunch of flowers, said, "Can I put those down to you?" And the little girl said, "No, Your Majesty, these are for you."
That moves me now for someone to say that, and I just think that would have meant something so much to the Queen.
And then 2 hours later came the tribute to Diana. And I remember setting that up with BBC. I said, it's going to be done from the Chinese dining room, and we're going to leave the French doors open. "Oh, no, you can't do that, there'll be too much noise." I said, there won't be any noise, and whatever noise there is, there will be no separation between the people who are watching at home, or wherever they're watching, and the people who are milling around in the precincts of Buckingham Palace. It's all one.
So what I say to you now, as your Queen and as a grandmother, I say from my heart. First, I want to pay tribute to Diana myself. She was an exceptional and gifted human being. In good times and bad, she never lost her capacity to smile and laugh, nor to inspire others with her warmth and kindness. I admired and respected her for her energy and commitment to others, and especially for her devotion to her 2 boys. This week at Balmoral, we have all been trying to help William and Harry come to terms with the devastating loss that they and the rest of us have suffered.
Their main priority was protecting Prince William and Prince Harry. You know, these were 2 young, vulnerable boys, and the Queen wanted to protect them. She was acting as a grandmother. She wanted to give them as much protection as possible before the inevitable, before the public, were all over them.
For the first time and only time in her long reign did she put family before duty.
The day of the funeral was one of those days where the earth stood still. No one went to work in the afternoon. Everyone was either in London, watching the procession, or they were at home, watching the television. It was one of those rare and historic moments where the world stopped turning. Diana's brother, Earl Spencer, gave a eulogy at the funeral in Westminster Abbey, which was incredibly poignant and emotional tribute to the late Princess Diana, but also to the waiting royals, to the grieving royals, to the members of the royal family who were in Westminster Abbey. It was also littered with some very serious barbs.
Fundamentally, she hadn't changed at all from the big sister who mothered me as a baby, fought with me at school, and endured those long train journeys between our parents' homes with me at weekends.
I remember when Earl Spencer delivered his eulogy, which was very much attacking the press, but also attacked the royal family.
There was a palpable sense of anger, frustration, resentment on his part.
She would want us today to pledge ourselves to protecting her beloved boys, William and Harry. We will not allow them to suffer the anguish that used regularly to drive you to tearful despair.
And of course, one of the things that Earl Spencer did was to identify Diana as a Spencer, so totally to take her out of that royal remit.
On behalf of your mother and sisters, I pledge that we, your blood family, will do all we can to continue the imaginative and loving way in which you are steering these 2 exceptional young men, so that their souls are not simply immersed by duty and tradition, but can sing openly as you planned. Above all, we give thanks for the life of a woman I'm so proud to be able to call my sister. The unique, the complex, the extraordinary and irreplaceable Diana, whose beauty, both internal and external, will never be extinguished from our minds.
It was a controversial speech in many ways, but one that did resonate with people around the country, around the world.
I thought he was very, very, very accurate.
Did sum up the mood of the nation. I really feel that.
It was almost a direct, if you like, attack on the royal family.
The noise swept in from outside. It was really strange. You were sitting in the Abbey and you heard this applause, and it swept and it sounded a bit like hailstones on the roof. Even Charles and the boys clapped after that. The Queen Mother and the Queen notably did not, and looked decidedly uncomfortable with the whole thing. And so I think that that moment they realised that they had to change. No, I think that Diana was a lamb to the slaughter when it comes to the royal family. She was only a 19-year-old girl, Lady Diana Spencer, quite naive. I think when it comes to the Queen, it would be wrong to say that they were looking for a baby machine, but it does seem a bit like that. Really, it wasn't until she was gone that they realised how much she had done in terms of transforming their popularity. Well, it had an impact straight away. And when the Queen went to India, it was noticeable that she went into the class and engaged with the children rather than just stood outside talking to the dignitaries and cutting a ribbon. She went into the classroom. That was the sort of thing Diana was doing.
Change has become a constant. Managing it has become an expanding discipline. The way we embrace it defines our future.
I think that she was very aware that for the royal family, they have to be representative of tradition. But it's almost like a wave that's crashing. You've got to be on the crest of that wave, not ahead too far so you are seen as this institution that's out of step, but not too far back that you're disconnected completely with what people are thinking and doing. The one thing that she was able to do during the 7 decades that she was Queen was to adapt to the age that she was living in.
I think there's a very clear line between the royals before and after Diana. They certainly weren't so tactile, and you didn't really see things like members of the royal family kneeling down and talking to the sick, the elderly and children. Whenever Diana hugged her children or hugged people or knelt down to talk to children, it was a wonderful photograph. And there's memorable moments when she was on board Britannia and the boys were waiting to see them and she hugged them. Also when she took them to amusements like Thorpe Park and she came down the water tube with them. The public loved that because it made the royal family seem normal. Well, the direct impact of Diana on the Queen seemed to be that immediately after the death of Diana, the Queen started doing things that we weren't really used to seeing her doing. She went to a council house and had a cup of tea with the people that lived there. She seemed to relax a little more. And I think she was making an effort to be more warmer, because the Queen's a very shy person.
You know, she was somebody, I think, born in 1926, but in the 50s, she was a very different monarch to she was at the end of her reign. And I think that she was always able to embrace technology, to make sure that she was appealing to young and old. So many people looked up to her, and I think that she led from the front.
But her ultimate goal throughout her 70-year reign was the survivability of the monarchy. And the monarchy has survived. It's survived all sorts of crises, but it has a marvellous capacity of picking itself up, dusting itself off, and starting all over again.
Overall, I think that Diana's impact on the royal family was very positive, especially as it's evolved the way it has today, and her memory is carried on through her sons.
At the centre of the House of Windsor, not least between William and Harry, the 2 grandchildren who she had quite a few points in her life stepped into an almost maternal, protective role for them.
I think Charles is currently doing a wonderful job. He stepped into the shoes of one of the most famous CEOs, one of the long-serving CEOs in the world, and it's still going on. And William is there learning the ropes. He's already a wonderful Prince of Wales. I can see him becoming a wonderful king. I think one of the Queen's greatest legacies is King Charles III and Prince William.